Welcome to another episode of the Brand Gravity Show, where we talk about the intersection between branding and psychology. I'm your host, Kaye Putnam, psychology-driven brand strategist. My guest today is very special for more than one reason, but one reason I'm incredibly grateful to her is because she actually recorded this episode with me twice. The first time that she did, my microphone was on the fritz and only recording about half of what we said. So she graciously decided to return and share the information again. I'm so glad because it is even better the second time around, and I can't wait to share it with you. Sarah L. Wallace is a certified Enneagram coach, host of the Enneagram MBA podcast, speaker, and workshop facilitator. With over 13 plus years in relationship building roles, working with government agencies and companies like the US EPA and Adidas Outdoor, now small business owners, large organizations, and event facilitators hire Sarah to help them use the Enneagram to develop confident, empathetic, and emotionally intelligent leaders with powerful, productive, and happy teams. Not all work. Here's a few fun facts about Sarah. She's a German Shepherd parent and boy mom. She identifies most with Enneagram 7. She's a 2-time marathon runner. My goodness. Owner of too many books. She's mostly vegan. Brainstorming is her love language, and she's always up for an Avenger conversation. I love this conversation, not only because I'm a huge fan of personality typing, as I know a lot of you are, given the popularity of my brand archetype quiz, but having this discussion gives us so much more self-awareness, which is the C part of the clarity code process. Knowing and understanding who you are so that you can accurately express that into the world is a crucial part of the branding process. Let's get into the interview with Sarah Wallace. So I am so excited to talk with Sarah Wallace of Enneagram MBA today on the podcast. Sarah, for those who haven't had the pleasure yet, can you give us a quick intro to the work that you're doing in this world?
Yes. So I have a company called Enneagram MBA, and I get to bring this what most people would consider personality assessment, insight and information about individuals and other people to corporate settings, teams, groups, and then different conferences and events. And it's always so fun just to have people, take away these ahas about, oh my gosh, I didn't realize that not everybody was seeing the world this way, or that not everybody had this particular strength or concern. And so it's really helpful in just growing as a human being, and then also in your collaboration and communication with whoever it is, clients, teammates, your family, friends.
Love it. So I think most of my audience, most of the people that are in my orbit, we all kind of love personality tests because I work with the archetype framework for building brands. But for those who haven't been introduced to Enneagram yet, can you give us just the overview of what it is?
Yes. So there's 9 different strategies that each kind of have some common behaviors, common tendencies, but at the end of the day, those 9 strategies are associated with a core driver or core motive, which I think it makes it a little unique from some of the others that tell you what your strengths are, if you're an introvert or an extrovert, how you might behave. This goes kind of one layer below that and tells you why you do what you do, which again is really insightful for understanding other people, bringing more empathy to conversations and understanding. And then within the framework, it goes into kind of letting you know like what you focus on. So when you walk into a room, what are your what's the lens that you're viewing the world, and then gives you some information about that's not the way everybody else is viewing the world. They're looking at rules and strategies, and you're looking at new ideas, for example, which, as you can imagine, can be very important as an entrepreneur and seeing the world differently than your clients, your teammates that you hire. And so it's just really, really eye-opening and helpful to understand yourself, but also that others' awareness piece.
Mm-hmm. What's been the biggest shift or transformation that you've seen somebody or a team go through previous to knowing this information and then after? Can you think of anything?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things is the awareness around what growth looks like and how it can be incredibly different for each individual. Because, I'm sure your listeners have heard all kinds of great advice, just do it, hustle harder, just kind of these common pieces of advice out there, which none of it is necessarily bad. It's just that if you're already doing that, you don't need that advice. But if that's more difficult for you, then you doing it will be like incredibly difficult probably, and something that should be recognized by you as a mentor, by you as a leader, or will be really meaningful if somebody recognizes it in you. An example of that might be, sevens, for example, are on the Enneagram known as the enthusiast or multitasker. And so what might come really easy for another personality type to just write the to-do list, follow the list, check it off, mission accomplished. For a seven to do that, that is actually a huge point of growth because they tend to jump from new idea to new idea. And then the opposite might be true, right? Growth for somebody who's a checklist person, just follows the procedures. Their growth might be adding spontaneity into their life, into their work, and being open to, shifting gears halfway through a project. And so I think that, just to sum that all up, it's like understanding where people are starting from so that you can recognize the growth that either you yourself have done or others have done, because it's going to be very difficult, very different for different types of people.
Mm-hmm. What I'm hearing is that it helps illuminate our blind spots or things that we don't naturally see. And it's such an interesting thing because our brain is constantly filtering information. We know that about neuroscience and how our brain works. And what's key to know, or what's useful to know, is how your brain is filtering that information. It sounds like Enneagram gives us some of that insight. Sarah, can you tell us what's your type and what does that mean about you?
So I am a type 7, or I identify most as the type 7. And I think, commitment has been a theme in my life, or lack of, but it has also helped me build a business that aligns with my natural preferences and my natural strengths so that I'm not constantly feeling guilty or it doesn't feel as hard. And so as a sevens have this superpower to be incredibly visionary. There's a couple others that are on there, but sevens just are incredibly optimistic. They can see the good, the possibilities in anything. And so as an entrepreneur working with clients or creating a vision for your team of where you want to take the business, like what an incredible quality. So it's not, okay, I need to be more rigid and strict. It's how can I structure this so that is helping me and bringing in other structure and routine, but still allowing the visionary, the possibilities to shine through, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yes. I think I've shared with you before. I took the test and I'm really close. Depending on the day, I'll test really high as either a 3 or a 7. And I understand that you can't be both of those things at the same time. So you have to kind of use your own discernment of where your motivation is coming from, to discern where it is. Can you talk about 3s a little bit too?
Yes.
I think that's a pretty common one for entrepreneurs.
It really is. Yeah. 3, 7s, a lot of 8s as well. And 3s, I will say, really one of the most mistyped Enneagram types because on the surface, they're known as the role model, the achiever. Who doesn't want that, right? And they're striving to feel successful and outstanding. And like most people would say, like, yes, I want to be successful. And so you kind of have to dig into a little bit more about where the drive to be successful comes from. And I think as a culture, especially in the United States, in general, we have a type 3. I think the United States is some type 3 energy.
Yeah.
And so since, elementary school, that's kind of been weaved in there. But 3s are incredibly effective, efficient. Like they have like the hustle harder t-shirts. visionary, but also able to like make it happen. And they might be okay with cutting a corner here or there, unlike some of the other types, but it's like, because we just got to get it done. We got to make it happen. We don't have to, no, it doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to get done. And I say that our threes are, the goal setting is their love language, which for an entrepreneur, like very true. The thing, kind of the shadow side, the blind spot, it is very difficult for threes to hear this. So some people may not be ready to hear this, or it may not resonate. It may just not be true. So take this with a grain of salt. But threes, their worth as a human being is wrapped up in their success. And so as somebody who is not a three and you're dealing with the three and maybe getting frustrated, you can have so much more understanding and empathy for, oh my gosh, how much pressure must they be putting on themselves? And then as a three, that is the work, is to untangle your job title, your salary, the car you drive, the house you live in from your worth as a human being. And what I hear from a lot of threes is that they will feel really guilty anytime they're not working on their business or on themselves. They're listening to a podcast in the shower, a self-help podcast in the shower. They're, instead of watching Netflix, they're like reading a business book or watching a business documentary or something. And so it's like never resting. And so for a lot of threes, the growth isn't able to happen. That awareness isn't able to happen until they have kind of a big burnout, a big kind of breakdown that's like, oh my gosh, yeah, this is not sustainable. And like, what do I actually want out of life? And then they can kind of, and that it might happen a couple times. I've heard from a few people that it's like, this had to happen to me like 3 times. But yes, very, very common in the entrepreneurial world to have that energy.
And I really appreciate that deep dive into that look. For people who don't know what their type is yet and want to learn about theirs, because we only touched on 2 of the 9. And obviously, just in that short little blip, you shared a test with me, so we can share that in the notes. Do you have any advice for somebody as they're taking the test or discovering what their type is for the first time?
Yeah, they can be tricky, like any kind of personality test. It's like, well, at work I'm this way, but at home I'm this way, or I used to be this way, but now I'm this way. And so what I tell people is just to think about what is true most of the time. Most true most of the time. Not, oh, I would never do that. If it's not 100%, it must not be me. It's no, what's most true most of the time. And then also being really honest, and this can sometimes be hard too, about who you really are and where you actually are, and not who you wish you were and where you wish you were.
Yes. Great advice. Great advice. And to translate this even deeper into specifically the world of entrepreneurship, you have identified 3 marketing styles based on some of the triads in the Enneagram. Can you talk to that?
Yeah, that's one of the fun things about the Enneagram is that you have the 9 types, but then also you can there's different groupings that give you additional insight and information. And one of those is around how you handle conflict. And so there are 3 types that tend to kind of put a positive spin on it, like reframe it, like the ultimate like PR spinners is kind of what I think of, or thinking like, oh, I'm here to help, everything's okay. But it offers hope. And it offers, right, that it's like, we won't be this way forever. And those are our 2s, our 7s, and our 9s. There's another type that needs to vent. And it's like, I'm mad about this. I'm worried. I'm anxious, whatever. I'm sad. I need to get this off my chest. I don't need a solution, but I need to be heard. And those are our 4s, 6s, and 8s tend to be in that category. And then we have people who are just like, listen, problem? Okay. Let's get to work. Let's solve it. Problem solving mode immediately. And those are our 1s, our 3s, and our 5s. And I bring this to marketing themes because I think of like a sales page or in a sales conversation. We tend to have one, like I notice this when I talk about this, or like I look at my own writing, I'm so heavy on the like what's possible. And I know that like I maybe some more data, like more like solution solving, like analytics, and then also bringing in what people might be worried about, what people might be concerned about, painting the picture. And so like when you can kind of bring in all 3 of those themes to your conversations, first identifying which one am I, like, do I see like one that I really lean into. Like, here's all the facts, here's all the data, here's everything you get in the course. It's 6-month coaching package. Like, here's what you get, right? And then you leave out the emotions and the future possibility, right? And so it's just being aware of where might I be focusing my attention in these conversations or in my sales page writing, and then how could I kind of bring in the other two so that I'm speaking to everybody. I kind of have something in there for everybody.
Oh, that's so important because we all naturally lean towards a specific way. I'm thinking of students of mine in my Brand Clarity Collective, and it's so clear for other people often to see where we lean into naturally. Some of them are so data and process oriented. Yes. Some of them are so future focused that they have trouble with the data and the processes. And then other people, they just get kind of like stuck or spin a little bit in the symptoms or like the ick of it all. So you recognizing that your ideal clients are also going to span that spectrum of all three helps you understand that you need to speak to each of them. I imagine in a sales call too, if you're starting to pick up on a theme of those three, you could speak more directly or like you could connect with them even better.
Yes. Kind of get an idea of, like, what are the questions that they're asking and how what might be different from what I'm explaining and highlighting.
Yes. Oh, such a powerful tool. I love that insight so much. We're going to get right back to the interview. For the next few seconds, I'm going to share with you my Brand Clarity Collective and how it can help you grow your income and impact. If you're an entrepreneur who feels stuck or uncertain about what makes your brand stand out, then this is for you. The Brand Clarity Collective is a mastermind multiplied by mentorship. It's part online curriculum, part digital mastermind, and it's designed to help you get crystal clear brand clarity so you attract more perfect clients and grow your business. We have a thriving community of entrepreneurs who are all smart and driven. As a member of the collective, you get an all-access pass to all of my best branding courses, as well as access to our private community where you can connect with like-minded entrepreneurs and get feedback and support directly from me on our coaching calls. The Brand Clarity Collective is priced at just $297 per month, and after 6 months, you keep lifetime access to all of the courses. To learn more and to see if it's right for you, head over to my homepage at kayeputnam.com. There's a big section where you can click to learn more. I'll also include the link in the show notes wherever you are listening or watching. All right, let's get back. You mentioned Enneagram can be really powerful when you're working with teams. And some of our listeners aren't there yet. They're just, one man, one woman show and are navigating that by themselves. But as you start to grow a team, is it just awareness or are you trying to match up different types with other types so that you have that harmony? Or how do you approach team building when it comes to the Enneagram?
I just had a call with a client yesterday. She's looking to hire an executive assistant and like using her Enneagram type and then kind of looking at the gaps and also like what's going to be a match for her. And so that's such a great question. In the hiring process, you can use it to both look at the role and then also look at, who they're going to be reporting to and what type of personality is going to be a fit for both the role and that manager or the culture of that team. And the Enneagram is this is what can kind of frustrate people sometimes about the Enneagram or how they can kind of get it wrong sometimes is that unlike most other assessments, you take a quiz and you get your results spit back out at you. With the Enneagram, it is a self-identification process. And so sometimes, most of the time, when you take a quiz or an assessment, the top result may not necessarily be your dominant Enneagram type. It requires additional deep diving because again, it's that motive that's driving the behavior. So depending on how you answered the questions. And so I don't recommend, giving somebody an Enneagram test and it comes back a 1 and it's like, okay, this is it. But in general, I think one of the most powerful things about the Enneagram is the language that it gives you to help you put words to thoughts or feelings you weren't necessarily sure how to communicate, or maybe even aware that we're there. And then you're like, oh my gosh, yes, this is why I feel this way, or this is a thing. So in hiring a team, it can give you some questions, some really specific questions to ask, some really specific things to know about yourself, and to ask about that other person. And then on a team, once they're on the team, like all relationships, there's the ebb and flow. And, as a leader, knowing that this is my leadership style, I know that I'm really great in this area, but I also know that other people can experiencing me in maybe this not great way. And so how is this person different than this person? And what might I need to kind of change and speak to them as far as giving feedback, communicating a task, putting them on groups or individual work, or, all kinds of that thing. And it's not just an easy, like, oh, you're this. All right, I know everything about you, but it starts the process of you knowing where that person's starting from and where you're starting from.
Yes. I don't know if I would call this luck or just happenstance, but a lot of my team members have been twos. It wasn't on purpose. It just happened to be that way. And we work really well together. And it's really interesting to see perhaps when some of those themes come up, and just to learn more about the relationship based on that knowledge. Because if you know that somebody is, because two is the helper, right? Can you speak to the two a little bit?
Yeah, twos are kind of, they prefer most of the time to kind of be pulling the strings, but from behind the stage. They're kind of the guide behind the throne. And they are incredibly relationship oriented. So we have our threes who tend to be more task and goal oriented. Twos are a great match because they're going to add in that relationship focus, and they are okay with doing tasks. That's not to say they can't do tasks, as long as it's connected to how it's serving someone else. And one of their biggest strengths is their ability to be incredibly empathetic. And so they're the type of person that they'll ask, how are you? And you'll say, oh, I'm good, I'm fine. And they're like, how are you really? Or like, what's really going on? And then they can struggle sometimes with boundaries because they do want to serve. They're striving to feel connected at the end of the day. And so they believe a lot of times that, and by the way, I will say, just because you like to help and serve doesn't necessarily mean you're two.
Yeah.
But again, it's the reason why. And so they can say yes when really they don't have the capacity or they don't want to. And then they can kind of burn out at work because they become, yes, I can do this. Yes, I can stay late. Yes, I can take this on. And it's yes, yes, yes. And so again, looking at growth, their growth is going to be to say no, where a type 5 growth might be to say yes more often because you always say no. So I don't know, does that resonate, or do you see any of that?
Oh, yes. Yeah. And it was really helpful to realize that about my team, because I have to be mindful as somebody. Again, I wish I knew for sure which one I was. I need to dig into the motivations of 3 and 7, but I do have that like squirrel thing that happens, or I'm like, ooh, that's exciting. Ooh, that's exciting. Ooh, that's exciting. Yeah. And that can be really overwhelming for people who are not in that same state of mind. So yes. I've learned to be more mindful with how I'm delegating, how I'm working with team through this awareness of these different styles and different strategies. And it's really powerful. So as I would love to ask, since you're a 7, what are you really excited about in your business right now?
Oh, that's a fun question. Hopefully it stays this way, but last year I finally got to get out and about and actually do more in-person events and workshops. And so this year I'm looking forward to getting to do a little bit more traveling and more in-person events and workshops. I know that I get a lot of energy from groups and from teaching, and more so than, other things. And so it's like, okay, can I continue to build this business so that it aligns with those things that energize me? And so I would just say getting to meet new people through these workshops and some traveling for different conferences.
Yeah. Yeah. Such a 7 answer too. I
Yeah,
love it.
it is. Oh, all the experiences, new people, new, yes. Do you feel that? Do you feel that a little
Oh yeah.
too? Okay, yeah.
Yes. Yeah. 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 And I have that feardom of boredom or
Yeah.
fear of monotony. Same. Yeah. That constricted feeling of having to do the same thing all of the time sounds terrible to me. So
Yeah.
I resonate. Yes. For somebody who has kind of this beginner knowledge of Enneagram, what path do you recommend to dive even deeper to make this more applicable to them?
So I would recommend starting with an assessment of some sort, just so you have some clues. Because
Yeah.
otherwise you're like, what am I starting with here? I could see myself in all of these a lot of times. So start with an assessment, and then based on those top results, dive in. There's no shortages of books, podcasts, articles, type in Google, YouTube has a ton of information as well, and start to learn about those top 2 or 3 types and look at what resonates with me, what doesn't. I will say, I don't want to call it a hack, but kind of if you're struggling between two, especially like your 3 and your 7, for example, in those situations, I recommend looking at what that type stress arrow is so that you can kind of get an idea of, oh my gosh, so in stress, the Enneagram kind of shows us how we might behave after we've tapped out of our own types, defense mechanisms, and coping strategies. We make a lateral move to the stress qualities of another type. And so understanding that can bring a lot of insight into, this is definitely my type. And I've heard that from a lot of clients as well. Once they figured out what their stress arrow was, it made understanding their dominant type very clear.
Great advice. That's the first time I've heard that phrase, but I think I've like vaguely remembered in some of my results that have come from the assessments that it tells you how you operate in stress. Is that what we're looking for?
There will be like certain behaviors that as that type you will absolutely do. Like when a 7 gets stressed, there's things that they do. But then the Enneagram theory goes that after you've it's kind of like pushing a door that you're supposed to pull. It's like you've pushed on it, it's not opening. So then you move to your stress arrow and try those behaviors. And that can be really insightful because typically they're out of character for you. And so that might be why you're struggling to identify your type, because it's like, well, I'm not like, so for example, a 7 moves to a 1, which is like the most rule, task, like procedure, routine oriented on the Enneagram. And so you're like, why do you know what? I'm cleaning the baseboards when I'm stressed, or I'm getting overly critical, or, and so it's like, that's out of character, but that's because I'm potentially stressed. So that's kind of why it can shine some light on that.
Yeah. Fascinating. Fascinating. It's so interesting how well, actually, where does Enneagram come from? Can you shine some light on that?
Yeah, it is a lot. Like it has like long, like 2,000 year, like religious, spiritual roots. And over time, different pieces have stayed. And then it got popular. And I think it was like the 50s. There are, kind of like the father of Enneagram. He was psychologist, or not a psychologist. What's the other? Psychiatrist. Yes. I believe that's it. And you'll have to look at the exact title, but he started to kind of put the pieces together and what we know today as kind of the modern Enneagram. And so, it can get incredibly spiritual. You can use it for, healing childhood trauma and that kind of thing. I typically use it more in kind of workspace, like more practical, but there are incredible teachers out there who dig really deep into kind of the more spiritual development and healing pieces of how to use the Enneagram on that journey.
So we mentioned understanding how you work with your team. We mentioned how to kind of shape marketing language to speak to different types. How else do you love to use the Enneagram in the business sense?
Kind of like I said about the language, like it just putting language to things. With all relationships, we have to communicate. And so it's just really understanding where somebody is coming from, whether it's a client. And I'll give you an example. And this is a practical way that your listeners can use it is, when we're working with somebody, whether we're consulting or coaching or doing a project, the way that they send an email might really irritate us, or that we might just be saying, just do it. And this has happened to me in the past where I was like, just do it, just try it. And they were a type that needed more time to process, needed more time to plan. And so knowing that, then I can get less frustrated. I can better support them because I know I'm a quick starter and I'm an act, more of like, let's just jump in and then we'll ask for forgiveness later. Whereas other people, it's not good or bad, right or wrong. It's just somebody across the Zoom call for me might be very different. And so it's not helpful for me to say, just do it to somebody like that. It's like, take your time, with knowing when to push and when to not can also give you some insight into your style about how you work with clients and communicate with them and support them, not just what comes easy for you, but also knowing what they might need. And you don't have to necessarily know their type, but knowing how you operate can give you insight into, oh my gosh, this person is obviously very different than me. Let me ask some questions or let me tweak my strategy with them.
Amazing. All right. I'd love to ask you kind of two off of the wall questions. First one being, my audience loves to learn. So we already talked about a bunch of resources that you can start to dive into Enneagram specifically, but maybe not specifically Enneagram, but whenever you're learning something new in your life or your business, what strategy do you use?
One book that I always think about and the strategy that I think about is that Atomic Habits book, where I know like it's kind of like over talked about at this point, but it really has impacted me. And so when I think about something, I'm like, okay, if I was somebody making $500,000, like how would that person show up? Or if I was somebody who was a sought after speaker, like how would that person be showing up? So I try and think about who I want to be and how I want to show up, and then kind of act as if and do things that way versus, which I can absolutely also get caught in though. It's just like, oh my gosh, this is hard. I'm not good at this. What are people going to think? But I really do try and take the kind of who do I want to be? Where do I want to be? And operate from that place.
I think he says in that book something to the effect of, every behavior is a vote for the identity that you want to have. And I love that concept. It's just like casting votes all day long for the person I want to be. I also am obsessed with that book. Second question, if you could plant a seed or an idea in everybody's mind that is watching or listening, what would you want them to know?
I think that not everything is black and white. And something I'm very interested in right now, and because I need to get better about it myself, is it's easier and it happens in our brains. And you probably have like more information on this or the science behind this, but it's easy for us to like create these stories because our brain is processing so many things. So to say, oh, that's right. Nope, that's wrong. They did this because of this. This means this. So we can just kind of move on with our day or in our life. But there's so much nuance. There's so much gray. And I think the Enneagram is a powerful tool to shine light on all the different ways that people can live and why they think something's right or why they think something's good. And so I think just spending more time, I don't know, is like critically thinking. That feels very like vague, but just asking like, is this true? Is this true? Do I absolutely know this true? Is there another way to look at this? Even if I don't agree with it, could I understand there's another way to do this or to think about this?
So well said. It's our brain conserving energy through the confirmation bias.
Yes.
Like I've decided something, I'm not going to like dive into it anymore. This is just the way that life is. And it can be really detrimental to relationships and to communication and all of the things that we have been talking about. So well said. Where can people find more about you and about the Enneagram?
I'm over at EnneagramMBA.com. And if you do have listeners that are new to the Enneagram or just want to learn a little bit more about a type that they think they might be, I have a cheat sheet that goes through just a quick bullet point, what makes each type that type, over at EnneagramMBA.com/cheat sheet. One word.
Perfect. We will link that in the show notes and in the description so it's easy to find. Thank you, Sarah. This was such an enlightening conversation. I love learning about these frameworks, especially ones that have such deep roots in practice. Like this methodology has been crafted over hundreds, maybe even thousands of years of actual practice and being useful for people. So thank you so much for sharing your genius with us. It's my honor, and I'm so grateful.
Well, thank you for having me. It's an honor to be on here. I love the work that you're doing and kind of bringing some of those tools to help us think critically and understand why we do what we do and think what we do and think what we think and what our clients are thinking. And so I've enjoyed learning more about you and learning from you as well.
Thank you. Thank you. I love that conversation, and I love using different personality typing and frameworks for different reasons. So while brand archetypes give us kind of that outward expression of our personality, it gives us a strong position in the market and a way to connect, like the role that we play with our ideal clients to create this emotional connection with them. Enneagram to me is more self-reflective. It's how am I motivated to get into work? What is this lens that I'm using to see the world? And how is that different from everybody else? Understanding that and having great awareness is a really important first step. And I think that those two frameworks work really well together. Again, if you want to find out what your Enneagram might be, you can take the self-assessment either in the show notes, which you can find at kayeputnam.com/podcast, or if you're watching on YouTube, we'll put it in a link below the video. And if you are still unsure what your brand archetype is, you can take my assessment that's on my website, kayeputnam.com/quiz, and find out those different parts of yourself. Thanks again to Sarah for being so gracious, and thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I will see you in the next one.